Hi there, welcome to the MakerKit podcast. In this episode, I chat with Saric, an entrepreneur from Canada who bootstrapped Provider using MakerKit. Rob's mission is to help clinics focus on patient care rather than wrestling with the business side of things. He explains how solving your own problems is one of the best ways to build products, and also how he bootstrapped Provider using direct outreach. Let's dive in. Hello, Rob. Welcome to the MakerKit podcast. How are you today?
Thank you, Giancarlo. It's doing very well. How about yourself?
Going very well. Very hot here in Italy, but very sunny and kind of love it right now. So you are a very experienced entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience. Do you want to talk a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been building startups and companies since 2005. My first company was a company called ATMS, which is Automated Taxi Management Systems. It was a logistics play back in the ASP days, ASPX days in Microsoft. We sold that company, fortunately, while I was in university, which afforded me the luxury to work on other businesses and projects without having to get a job. Obviously, the challenge with selling a company early is that you think everything is easy. You think that it's easy to build a startup. It's easy to build into a channel, build a product, distribute it. And a lot has to do with timing and luck. And in my first experience, that's exactly what it was, because the subsequent 10 years was trying to do the same thing. And it was very, very difficult. And I went through a lot of startup failures and a lot of growth as a person. I feel like nothing touches you more in terms of your cognitive biases, who you are as a person, your maturity as trying to build something from nothing. The market is honest, and the market will tell you what works, what doesn't. And you can lie to yourself as much as possible and get slapped in the face. But at the end of the day, business is an objective endeavor and you have to create value. So I've been on this pursuit since I've been young. And now, obviously, over the last 5 years with AI coming to the forefront, it's become exciting. I've now been in a situation where I feel like we're in a gold rush, back circa Yukon in the 1800s. We have the pickaxes and we're trying to find where to mine the gold. Obviously, the challenge here is that people would say that you don't want to be the person mining the gold. You want to be the person that's actually putting the gold in the bank. And most people that made money during the gold rush were the people that actually were taking the assets and managing them, as opposed to the people that were actually doing the work. And software does that to a certain extent. So I'm very fortunate, and I've been building software for a long time. I've done it for my own agency. And most recently, I've launched a startup using MakerKit called Provider.app. I am a part owner of an orthopedic physiotherapy clinic here in Ottawa, and I care deeply about health. I have sick parents, so both my parents are close to their 80s, have multiple comorbidities, have been sick, have mobility issues, and I've been part of the healthcare system for way too long in ways that most people don't want to be involved. If you go across the world and ask, how good is a health system, most people have their stories and complain about issues with their respective countries, and no health system is perfect. But I find a lot of the inefficiencies are tied around things that can be improved, and a lot of wasteful inefficiencies, processes, bureaucracies, things that tend to take away from care. When I started managing and helping support grow a clinic, the clinic is called Human 2.0 in Ottawa. One of the challenges is you have clinicians and then you have to actually manage a business. And managing a business while also taking care of patients is very, very counterintuitive. People don't sign up to manage businesses as clinicians. They sign up to take care of people. But to sustain yourself, you're kind of put in a position where you have to do both. And what I was doing was spending endless time looking through spreadsheets, trying to download reports, which is the traditional model, trying to find ways that we can improve, our retention, improve our total revenue per week, find ways that we can improve our revenue per visit. And it was incredibly, incredibly monotonous and inefficient.
In a way, you built a software for yourself, right? You knew the problem firsthand, so you didn't really need to validate it, which is a huge issue in the bootstrapping. Well, it's a huge issue for startups in general, I guess, because there's many VC-funded startups that don't really do much. And you already knew what you needed to build because this is a problem that you had to solve for yourself.
And in my background as well, Giancarlo, I built dental software. I was hired to do as a consultant was a DSO, which is a dental service organization, is buying hundreds of clinics. And when you buy these clinics, there's a disparate software stack across each of these back offices. So one would have one dental platform, like let's call it Dentrix. Another one would have something that is Ascend. And none of these systems talk to each other. It was very difficult to do aggregated reporting, at scale. And what would happen is they would hire IT teams that would use BI tools. They would have data analysts and so much overhead in these organizations that were really unnecessary. And it was largely just to understand how the clinics were performing. And I was brought in to try to consolidate this. And those lessons, when I started partnering with clinics and advising clinics on the allied health side, more with the private practices, I realized the problem was the same. So I'm very fortunate when I joined Human 2.0, I'm like, there's better ways to do this. So I had my previous experience and then my lived experience when I'm actually working in the clinic. This is something that needs to be improved, and it will be improved. And is the question, is it going to be me, or is it going to be another, entrepreneur who says, I have this similar problem, whilst telling them I need to fix this? And I thought, why not me? Why not build something that's going to serve me and also potentially help a lot of clinic owners as well?
Yes. Provider.app is a bootstrap business, right? You didn't seek external funding or
No,
anything.
yeah. So right now, almost at 100 customers. It's a SaaS subscription business. The bones of it were started through MakerKit. I initially wanted to automate some monolithic systems that made it really hard for me to download reports. So I built some utilities, automations that allowed me to pull these reports. And as I was building these reports, I was putting them back into a spreadsheet. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing to myself? I'm automating to make myself do work. So I
Yes.
said, okay, I think the right thing to do is actually put it into Postgres database and figure out how I can actually visualize this, and then use the luxury of AI for looking at deep data sets, putting some logic around it so that I can set targets and goals. I used it for my clinic, and we struggled trying to cross the $400,000 per year mark, and now we've exceeded that. So we're at over 500, 600,000 a year. This is largely by discipline and making sure that I pay attention to my data weekly and monthly. It's just like it's analogous to health, right? You can't get in shape and be healthy by going to the gym once, right?
Yes.
The same thing with security. If you want to have security hygiene for your organization, you can't patch your server once. You have to build a discipline on it, a day in, day out, a habitual routine that is a healthy way for you to actually stick to a schedule and make sure that you maintain this consistent hygiene for yourself, for your business, and so on. And this is really what I started doing for clinics, and why I believe what I'm doing with Provider.app really helps. It's important to be consistent, right? And in most cases, a lot of money is left on the table because you're just not consistent with evaluating how you're performing.
So Provider.app is currently has 100 paying subscribers. It's fully bootstrapped by yourself, which
Yes.
means profitable, I guess, widely
Yeah,
profitable.
yes, it's profitable. And it's interesting because, as an entrepreneur, this is a very tough point. Do you want
Mhm.
to be a scale business? Do you want to bring in overhead and staff so that you can support a much larger, broader mission? Or do you want to maintain a niche focus and grow it into a vision that you see as the real opportunity? These are really hard decisions because right now, the risk of not having a board, the risk of not having oversight in terms of investors is actually nice. But I also am
Mhm.
well aware what's happening in the next 2 to 5 years is with agentic systems with AI, you need investment to build them out, especially when you're onto something that's potentially scalable. These things are always on the back of my mind where, is bootstrapping the right approach? Is a small angel round the right way to go? Is this going to be a VC backed fund where we try to scale 100 million plus? All of these things are narratives that constantly play in every entrepreneur's mind.
Yes, to me, MakerKit is a small business, very simple, run by myself, maybe with some external help, but not too much. But sometimes I feel like, am I selling myself short? Could I do something more ambitious? Which is probably what's going to be happening with Supermode. Supermode is the upcoming MakerKit product that's going to help customers manage their Postgres database with Supabase, just like a CMS. So making it as easy as WordPress. And that's also a problem I have because my wife helps manage discounts, licenses, users' passwords that they lost somehow. And right now she cannot do it because it's with Supabase, and Supabase Studio is not really user friendly for
Not at
non-developers.
all.
My upcoming product also comes from the same need, let's say that way. Like, could I be doing more? Because MakerKit obviously is going very well, but there's a limit to how many customers I can get. It's really exciting to hear that you might be growing Provider to
And
such a scale.
and to give you some credit, what I call MakerKit is it's an ideal environment for someone like me. I am a small team. I tend to do all of the technical development myself. When you think about it, it's like you have a marketing function and a sales function. The beautiful part about MakerKit is a lot of the thinking that I traditionally did when I was building systems is off the table. And I think that is a huge luxury because I spent so much time in the past thinking about authentication layers, what systems to use, thinking about how to structure APIs. All of this stuff is under the hood, invisible work that does not help build your business, but is necessary. And where MakerKit has been wonderful is even with me busy growing the business and selling the business, I can leverage your investment into the platform and know what new technologies are out, what things I need to update, what I need to do to stay relevant, what stacks are useful. Even with your AI libraries, it helps inspire ideas on how I can extend it or take it further. I absolutely love it. And I think your model is correct. You have a baseline application that supports multiple libraries and stacks. And then there's going to be specific needs, just like I have. And I'll be a customer for sure of your Supabase utility because I as well have people that need to manage user. I don't need a CMS, right? So this is where it obfuscates. I don't need to port everything to WordPress. I don't want to push it into a CRM. I feel like that's like added fat to an application. I would love to be able to have a creative way where I can provision use. So I really love this idea. And I think that's going to be a growth pattern is hyper focusing on the people that love the community and are growing it and serving them with other ways that they can grow their products through your ecosystem. And it's wonderful. And I have nothing but great words to say for MakerKit. I would say my only struggle is keeping up. When Turbo came out, I'm very slow at migrating. It's one of those things I tend to say, okay, I don't need to update. And then I incrementally update, and then you get so deep into your previous legacy version. So what I do now is everything that new I build in the new libraries, but I'm slowly trying to transition to the V2 versions.
You're right. To build Provider.app, did you do it yourself or did you hire external contractors or an agencies to build it for you?
So I have a small team in Ottawa. Our agency is called HWARP. So we've been
All right.
doing utilities and development for the better part of 15 years. So specifically as it was pertaining to the mapping of the practice management systems and mapping the metrics into our database, I had support for that because it's a very manual process. I don't want to get into the technicalities, but it takes a bit of time. And especially when they're very old monolithic systems that tend to export in formats that are really hard. So that process I had support with. Everything else in terms of front end design, I use a combination of Tailwind, the Shed CNUI, Tremor Blocks, which is now purchased by Vercel. I try to use as much what is steadily available, and it's afforded me the luxury now to keep on building onto it. I have a contractor that I bring on projects to build out certain features just to support scale. Now, what we're doing is just to give you a little bit of context with Provider, we pull our primary system of record is practice management systems. And so we pull from a practice management system that's popular here in Canada. And then we also pull from Google Analytics. We pull from Google Business Profile. We pull from Google Ads, Meta Ads. So really what we're trying to do is aggregate every data point that matters for a clinic owner and help them create context on, okay, if I'm going to spend this much for ads, what's my ad ROI? Which is actually a very hard thing to do when you're trying to base it on referrals and following through a lead. And then on top of that, what are the things I care about? So how do I calculate the grade, worth, and value of my clinic? What is my EBITDA calculation? So we also enable you to import accounting and report information so that we can kind of close the picture. So we have your operational data, which is all about patient flow, expense management. We have your marketing data, and then we have your performance data. When you tend to aggregate those three, you have a very nice dimensional view of how a clinic operates. And then with that, we can then give AI insights. We can look at trends over time. We can pattern it over the last 12 months. I have using Resend and Trigger.dev to basically look for logic gates where if someone's targets go down or there's an impact that is going to hurt their clinic, they'll get an email notice. So slowly trying to enable a clinic owner to have easy access to the data they care about, understand what's happening without having to do manual data pulls and being aware of where to take action and hopefully drive better results for their business. And like I said, for my own clinic, it's been a lifesaver. And this is the best sales tool, by the way. As a word of advice for anyone building something, if you can say, this is how I did it for myself, it is always way better example than anything else. We had a startup that had failed where I was building a software for orthopedic surgeons. And because I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, it was constantly playing the communication telephone game where, I
Yes.
want this, I want this. But when it came to building it and then using it, there's always a disconnect. And it was really hard to bring in the market. And eventually we closed the startup. But it's because I wasn't intimately involved with the problem myself. And I
Yes.
find the cheat code for anyone building startups.
Absolutely. Solving your own problems is the best way to build a
And it's more
startup, to
enjoyable.
build
It
anything.
makes
And worst case scenario, you solve your own problem. But I found similar pattern when building probably my own products, because while I built MakerKit, I also built different products that I never released. And the reason is I was excited for the first 2 days, and then I was not. And I'm like, is this a product that I want to keep working on for the next 5 to 10 years? Is this a problem I want to fix? And I'm the kind of person who, if I'm not excited about something, I don't really want to do it. Even where I saw a path to money and revenue, I decided that was not an idea worth pursuing just because it wasn't something I was familiar with mostly, and also not passionate about. But it looks like in your case, you really found both. You solved your own problem and you solved a problem in a niche that many are probably a little bit unfamiliar with, because healthcare, let's be honest, there's a lot that can be improved in terms of digitization and applications, which I feel like it's an untapped market, and you are
100%.
able to feel it.
And what I would say, Giancarlo, is one of my maturations where I matured as an entrepreneur is understanding. I have a colleague who is a mentor of mine, Monty. When this is when we were working on the orthopedic surgeon project, and it opened my eyes. And he said, well, the fundamental problem is the direction of the value you're creating for your end user. And you'll learn very quickly when you're doing an operational improvement versus a revenue opportunity where you can make money for people. I would always focus on helping people make more money. And it was one of those moments since the last 10 years, I've always said, does this improve their chance of making more money, the end user? And if it's no, I'm probably not going to build the product, because the stickiness of a product that can actually grow revenue is much better than something that will save time. Because save time is subjective, where you can actually measure quantitatively revenue growth. And that little tidbit of advice has helped me a lot in terms of determining, am I going to build something that is going to save some time in a workflow? And that was really something that I found helped a lot in my direction of the things I've been building, the products I'm motivated around. And it's not that I'm entirely capitalistic. It's just people want to invest in things that are going to return their money. And I think
Yes.
now that we're entering into the world where everyone is saying, subscription model and SaaS is dead, which I vehemently oppose. I think that, the traditional pricing model for SaaS is dead, but I believe that subscriptions will always exist if the value exchange is there, because
Yes.
it's a simplified, it basically aggregates the cost of value over time. That's all really a subscription model is anyways.
Yes. Has AI changed your roadmap a little bit? Because I think you started probably a little bit before AI actually exploded. What do you think AI can bring to your current business?
This is why I love what I'm working on. Part of the recommendation by anyone who is in the AI sphere is like, what's your moat? Right? AI essentially removes your moat. And what I fundamentally believe is data, which is what my business is based around, is very proprietary to a clinic owner. And if you can create a pathway for a clinic owner to have a single source of truth and then use AI around that, I think that's a very valuable proposition. So if I wasn't building a data product that was aggregating data, I would say that AI would influence my trajectory a lot. But really, what I'm doing is following something like Sam Altman saying, assuming that AI will get infinitely better, are you going to build to that roadmap that they're getting infinitely better? And that's really what I focus on is, AI will still not take a proprietary data. That requires permissions, that requires privilege, that requires security building products. If I can build pathways and pipelines to acquire that data and then use AI in a secure and efficient manner, I feel like as AI improves, the product will. So that's kind of been my model. I think the interesting thing as well is understanding that AI will also be multimodal as it is, and you'll
Hmm.
be able to access it from different interfaces. So I can't wait to see what the maker kit of the future is going to look like, because it's going to be through different types of conversation UIs. It's going to be through different interaction methods. So as people get used to interacting through different means and having tools that are more accessible through different channels, all it is the building blocks need to make sure that they support those different models of engagement. And
Yes.
one of the use cases I love for what I'm doing is being able to be a AI co-pilot that is agentic and can answer questions that are extremely hard for a clinic owner to answer today. Right? If I can build
Yes.
a tool where they could say, I just lost a physiotherapist. How much money is this going to cost me? How fast do I have to find a new physiotherapist? Where could I find a physiotherapist? And that combines both web searches, it combines proprietary data sets, and it combines some AI LLMs in a way that, when combined together, will actually produce a very purposeful response that will give them the answers they need. To do that, 5 years ago is absurd, right? That would have took a lot of time. So really, I think AI has, from a use case perspective, added value. And then from a development standpoint, it allows for iterating very quickly. And with AI married with MakerKit, it's just so fun to build.
It
It
is
is
quite unbelievable.
honestly, I don't know what to say other than it's like, when you have a good product, when you don't really want to tell a lot of people about it because you're worried you're giving other people a chance
Yes.
to but the
They can
reality is
catch up.
you need a framework. I would argue that the problem with AI today is a lot of people don't start with a framework. So AI cannot think as deeply and constructively with the years you've spent on building MakerKit. It's just that's not something AI will start with as a starting point. But when you pair that with a strong foundation, what you can build is endless. So it's one of those things that I'm very lucky I found you. Honestly, I think it was a demo I came across in Git, and someone started your library. And the old building ways of my past was finding like MVC, .NET MVC templates and trying to find things in that ecosystem. And once I've pivoted away from the Microsoft world and discovered you, I'm like, wow, this is actually it's fun again.
One of the many things that I'm working on in MakerKit right now is actually to improve agentic coding for everybody, for both known developers and developers. I always stress that someone needs to understand the code to actually use it well, because AI has gotten so good but makes mistakes, and
Totally.
sometimes those mistakes are fatal because they create vulnerabilities. So my focus is going to be, how do I make sure that AI doesn't write code that is going to create huge issues for my customers? And that means a lot of rules around it. And what I found is that when AI starts with a framework, as you just said, it can be so much better because it requires less context. It doesn't have to build everything from scratch, which creates vulnerabilities, because if you generate thousands and thousands of lines of code, there's going to be vulnerabilities and there's going to be bugs.
Of
But if he
course.
uses a framework, which is augmented, aided with ad hoc rules, that's where I think AI really, really shines. And I've done some blog posts about it using Cloud Code, and it took less than 10 prompts to build the value proposition of a SaaS, which is quite nuts. But I always say, if you don't understand the code, I'm not really sure I would publish a production app, especially in the healthcare sector, because of that. That would be messy.
Well, and I think it's interesting because everything is paralleled. You look at the content
Mm.
production today, and critical thinking is at risk. You have people that are producing more content than they ever have, and noise versus noise to signal ratio is significant. And this is going to exist in content and media and products. And what's going to be very difficult is discerning what's good versus what's not. The one consistency is people's attention is the same, right? It's very limited. You have to capture their attention. You have to capture their time. So there is going to be either a consolidation where there's going to be people that are going to use less and less tools just because there's so much and they don't know what's good and what's not. And on top of what you said is the security concerns are real. There's never been more cyber issues ever in history. There is more cyber attacks that close small businesses ever. And I think 94% of small businesses are at risk. 55% of small businesses in Canada that get hit with a cyber attack close within 3 years. So it's not just about building a use case that serves a function. You actually have to build a business. And I think there's a dichotomy between, I'm just going to build software. And this all started with this whole notion of building in the public, right? Where it's like, I'm trying to build a fast application that serves a utility that I can launch, show my progress, sell, get some money. But you want to build assets that are defensible You want to build long time value. Like, I never want to work on something that I'm not going to work on for 10 years. You want to put your lifeblood into it. You want it to be your
Yes.
canvas. That's why I appreciate with what you're doing, like with the best expression of who you are. If anyone ever asked you, who is Giancarlo? It's like, take a moment and look at MakerKit, because the best expression of passion, that is your art form. That is your expression of creation. If you were, Michelangelo back in the day and he had the tools, this is your canvas. And I find that that can't be done unless you're dedicated to it and passionate about it and consistent with it. Even with Provider, everything through that product I care deeply about. And I spent endless hours like meticulously caring about different features. This is not something I passively do. It's an obsession, but it's a good obsession because I think, we talked about this earlier. We live one life and we want to create a legacy. We want to create value for people. We want to create something that creates enormous value at scale. And the only way to do that is through really believing in what you're doing and having people get that value out of it. And MakerKit in the community is part of that, right? It's you've built a creator tool, which is an amazing thing, and you should be very proud, right? I'll keep on supporting it, and I'm looking forward to the day where I have a lot of cash flow and I can support you to do whatever you want, so I can.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been 3 years now, and I'm still very excited to work on it, honestly. Despite having thoughts of building other products and having another product now, it's still, first thing I do during the day is check that people aren't stuck. That's my first worry every day, which is great because the community is thriving in a way, is doing well. Pretty much everybody gets an answers within a few hours,
Yeah.
maybe a day, but you can't really say the same in other technologies or maybe competitors, but usually the answer is like, hey, why don't you create a GitHub issue? And then we look at it. So yeah, thank you so much.
So this is a question to you, Giancarlo. If you had a crystal ball and the community can contribute and help, because to me, part of where I see I can add value is creating recipes that you can leverage in the community leverage. Where would you see that you would like to have community support in areas for MakerKit that you think would be creative for the members as well as you who's managing the platform?
We've had the recipes forum in Discord. The only problem with that is that it's kind of hard to find, but there isn't at the moment a way for customers to contribute a little bit more to MakerKit. And that's kind of my fault. If, for example, I open source the website, that would probably bring a ton of people to the website to contribute to the documentation, to the recipes.
But there's a huge risk, right? Then you need moderators. It changes the whole dynamic of it needs to be a moderated model for it to work. I don't think it's a quantity model. I think it's a quality model, right?
Yes, it's food for thought. It's definitely one thing that I'm going to be thinking a little bit more. But yeah, in terms of outreach and how you got customers, how do you find them, and what's your current marketing strategy that you
So,
think you can talk about a little bit
really,
without
so
spilling too many secrets?
I think it's brute force. I always say you need to get to 100 customers before you buy ads. This has always been my philosophy. I may be wrong, but to me, until you're at a larger scale of customers, you don't understand your customers, which is risk by buying them into your funnel. So what I do is I do walk and call sessions. So I have a list of prospects. The nice thing about clinic owners is they are usually insurance backed, so you have access to their phone numbers, and I will go for long walks and I will call. They'll probably think I'm crazy. But at the end of the day, I think it's extremely important for having people feel like you're their partner. I would say first 100, 200 customers, my preference is that they love what we're doing. They feel like I'm there to support them as I am, and I'm their growth partner. And the only way to truly do that is to actually have time where I'm listening to them, talking to them about their problems, and talking about what I'm building and how it's helped me. That tends to create people that are not going to churn, and it creates a wonderful loyalty base where people are rooting for you. So you got to do that dirty work, because if you don't, you're a transaction, meaning that the product led growth model where people are just signing up, using the product, and that's keeping them on. I feel like that's not what I want. I do want to get to scale, but right now that's not what I do. So that's number one is actually just dialing and talking. And surprisingly, that model, people don't realize how successful it is. And I think everyone needs to understand sales. Everyone needs to understand cold calling. I think it's a art that is, I've been very fortunate because I've been in the game for so long that I was taught by people in the past who had very traditional models on how to get in front of people.
Yep.
And calling someone who you think is out of the question, actually, they'll usually pick up if you can talk and create value and not waste their time. So that's number one. The second one is Facebook groups or the channels that you can find your niche in. And what I do is I don't ever sell the product. I solve the problems. And usually if you're building something within a channel and the problem is, I don't know how to do this with this report. How do I extract what am I supposed to do with this? They talk around the problem and you can support them and help them. And that's what I do. And a lot of times I say, if you want to see how I automated it, you message me and I can show you how I do it. So very indirect at this point, but it's got me to almost 100 customers. So I will continue doing that. And then most likely I'll be then transitioning into more an ad-based model. And then the ad-based model will be me selling assessments on where they are from their clinic for free. I'm not going to sell the product. It's all about me creating value. There's a wonderful, I can't remember what the post was online, where they talked about the who, the what, and the why is what you offer for free. And the how is what you sell. So when I create any ad campaign, it's like, okay, I'm going to create an assessment. It's going to give you the who, the what, and the why on around your problem. And then, oh, if you want it, if you want a performance report, because one of the things we do with our product out of the gate, you get a 30-day free trial, but we'll give you a 2-year performance report for free. And that process is actually very complicated if it wasn't for the systems we've built. So we know that we can create a tremendous amount of value without a lot of effort if they sign up, use our platform. And then that will be, if you cancel, that's fine. But here's the last 2 years of your performance from a marketing perspective, from a finance perspective. Here's the things you're doing well. So they get value out of the gate without anything. And if they don't want to pay the small subscription fee for per year, then that's up to them. But at least I'm creating value before I'm asking for it in return.
That's great advice. Creating value before asking for anything. It's been a little bit what I've been doing with MakerKit, providing a free version, ton of articles that cater to pretty much everybody using next.js, React, or Supabase.
This is another testament to MakerKit. I had zero experience in Supabase. I had zero experience in Next.js before I started MakerKit. And all your tutorials
That's
helped
great.
me. And now I'm a convert. I love it. And I think that is the best thing you could do for a customer in a community is educate them.
Educate them,
To
teach
do
them.
things. Teach them because in most cases you will know more than people because you've been more intimately involved, and that's kind of
Absolutely.
what I'm doing with providers, educating clinic owners on how to actually manage data, what they need to do, what they need to look for. So it's akin to what you're doing with MakerKit is the same thing I'm doing with clinic owners. You always are an advisor, even if your product is a software product. You have to always have a component where you're teaching people.
That's great. So what would be your advice to the people starting now, the aspiring SaaS founders who want to be their first SaaS, perhaps bootstrapping their first SaaS? And especially since in your case, you have two channels that seem to work well. One is cold calling, which is what most of us are afraid of doing. And the other is Facebook groups, which is the digital kind of version. What would be your advice to them?
So you need to go outbound and you can't do this in a vacuum. You need to have conversations. I'll tell you a story, and I think this will answer the question beautifully. My sister is going to be launching a new SaaS offering, and she's going to be using MakerKit as part of it. Part of why I love the new MakerKit is packages, because I find packages are a playground for messiness, and it controls it in a way that she can build things and rip and replace without messing up with the core of MakerKit. So she is going to be launching something called skillbuilder.ai. In Canada and everywhere in the world, there's a fundamental problem where people are not going to have critical thinking skills, and we don't know what AI baseline literacy is for a lot of people. When you think about associations, there's a Chamber of Commerce, there are not-for-profits. A lot of them serve their members, and they have no ability to accelerate AI adoption and literacy. So part of the model is, okay, we understand there's a massive problem where there's going to be a disconnect with people that are using AI versus people that are not. And how do we make sure that the students that are currently using the same institutional education system can now adopt the modern way of learning and modern tools like AI without actually being complacent about it? Because even with me, you said it best, I get lazy and I trust AI is going to produce the code sometimes. And I think those parameters of evaluation are very important. But I also have 25 years of experience, so I can cheat because I've earned it. If I'm 16, 17, 18, and I'm going to go into software, there is a high probability that you're going to cut corners, which means that you're not going to be doing deep thinking, critical thinking, which means that you're going to be jumping to conclusions, assuming AI is the pathway forward. So what I would recommend for anyone is you need to know a problem that's going to exist for the next 10 years, a trivial problem. But if you can map out, I always look at Jeff Bezos. He's like, customers are always going to want cheaper goods. They're always going to want it delivered faster. They're going to want good customer service. So if you can map something out that you know is going to be a problem for the next 10 years, it's worthy to start. The second part is you need to understand channels, because the problem now is not the product, the problem is distribution. So distribution is the effort to build a prototype with tools like Aggregate is so small that it gives you it's the new website, right? Before, people used to buy domains, pump out a website, and then they have a business idea and they try to raise money from a website. Now the next level is you can build a prototype almost with a snap of a finger. You can do it with Lovable and all these kind of no code tools, which I think make me puke. But at the end of the day, they will eventually mature into a point where they will also have a framework that can potentially accelerate development and so on. But the core here is you need to, one, have a problem that you know exists for the next 10 years, which is in most cases you can by just asking second and third order questions. And then the second part is really thinking deeply about how you're going to distribute that product and get deep in the market. Now, depending on your ambitions, sometimes you can get overwhelmed with those first two and not start. So my third one is start as small as possible. What we're doing with my sister's example, where she's launching skillbuilder.ai, will be focused on a baseline assessment for AI literacy. Make it free, make it an assessment that anyone can take, target not-for-profits that are trying to understand where their staff is in terms of AI. And one of the things now is, when you look at a lot of these organizations, specifically in Canada, where you have pressure for institutions, specifically the government, to keep up, and these bureaucracies can't move, these tools are going to be imperative to help them set an understanding of where they need to go. I'm a big believer in finding a problem that's going to be 10 years out. It's problem. Is the problem yours, right? Which is obviously what I did with the provider, and is there a channel that you can go to, or is it really hard to find these people? If it's really hard, then it's going to be very hard to talk to them, to get access to them. I learned that lesson from serving orthopedic surgeons, which again, I didn't follow my own advice, but orthopedic surgeons are very hard to get to. They're always busy and they don't really like thing products. So that's a good reason why it failed. The third and the most is start small. The smallest utility of value that is going to create some sort of interest that will give them enough to try.
Solve one problem and solve it well.
Yeah. And I would
I'm
even
gonna
say
have,
that
yeah.
solving a problem is hard. So I would say create a atomic unit of value, because solving a problem can be multivariate, whereas a atomic unit of value can be, I get a report. That report may not solve my problem that I don't know AI, or it doesn't, I need to improve but at least it gives me some intrinsic value that I can share, I can talk about. And that's an easier thing to do than to actually solve a problem, which like I was telling you, is like, problems are hard, right? That's why they're problems.
Yes, absolutely. I think distribution is probably the hardest thing these days, because there's, as you said before, there's so much noise around. It's just difficult to stand out. And that's also why many startups resort to very expensive videos or very aggressive marketing, as we're seeing on
And
Twitter right now.
I hate that the only way you can market is be a social media influencer. It bothers me. Like, I would hate to see you have to go and build a channel and I like this where we're having conversations. I think this is a great way to start building influence and building the brand awareness, where you have constructive long form content. I still think that's the best. And obviously podcasts have been a great channel for a lot of people. But when it comes to like Instagram and you're doing micro posts, it really is this intention economy where you're trying to gamify clicks. I'm hoping that society in the future gets away from this. That's my hope.
Who knows? I find it hard. But just to touch a little bit on the distribution, just as an example of what I did with MakerKit, is I started writing blog posts and documentation 1 year before I actually shipped the product. That's crazy, but that's how I built SEO, which then compounded over time. And MakerKit, I think 90% of customers come from Google. Recently, ChatGPT as well, because these LLMs search Bing and Google, and that's how they find you. So if you position yourself well on Google, I know SEO is changing, but LLMs still read search engines indexes. So I think SEO is, it's considered old and boring because it takes a long time. But if you do it well, then the benefits are just going to compound over time. Hopefully in the future with AI as well, it's going to be a
Well,
similar game.
and the best example, and I'm recounting this several times, where I'm looking for a specific problem on Google, and guess what comes up? It's MakerKit blog,
Make a
which
kit of
was
the
not even about MakerKit. It was about a specific issue with Supabase, for instance. So testament to you, right? And I think that's important, right? The problem with blogs is it takes time to create good content. And a lot of what's happening now is the signal to noise ratio. We're using LLMs to just pump out lots and lots of content. So being able to discern with actual valid information is hard, but it's the right thing to do because it creates long-term games with long-term people and map out long-term strategies. If you're willing to do that, you're going to reap the rewards. It might not be, like you said, 2 years in, 3 years in, but 5 to 10 years out, you're going to be like, wow, I built the momentum, I built the community. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity with MakerKit and just being present and being around. There's a lot of builders who have the need for being educated on the right way to do things. And it's crazy because I feel like this model of solopreneurs that are building products that can scale, I don't see how I would want to do it any other way. I can't imagine changing now. Before it was like start with the domain. Now it's like, okay, how can I maximize the value, make it out of the gate?
Yes. I noticed that Provider is both a SaaS, but you also have a tier that is more like a productized business. Is that an advice that you will give to beginners? Because that sounds, in a way, easier to get started with.
This is obviously between you and me and whoever's listening to this podcast. Every license I've sold has been that model, has been the coaching service plus the clinic and the intelligence tool. And naturally, I want that because I need feedback. I need to make sure that they're using the product. It's funny because I was even of the mindset where I was just going to remove the other tiers. But initially, when I thought about building the product, I wanted to be PLG, product led, no intervention. And then you realize that it's an impossible feat because when you're offering a tool that is a competence gap for your end user, meaning that they don't actually know how to do these things properly, there's a bit of coaching that's required for them to understand the benefits and understand how to maximize the utility of the tool. And on top of that, they're busy. So, when you think about it, for me, tech enabled services where you're using what you've built for the end customer and coaching them through it and doing checkpoints every month is a great way to start off. And I find that I enjoy those conversations and it's influenced the product development big time, right? That's the best feedback you can get is people that are using your product or saying, you know what, why don't we connect to Google Business Profile? I'm like, yeah, we should. That's a good idea. And then you roll it out. You're building trust with the initial customers. They're getting excited. You're getting feedback, and you're creating these feedback loops that are going to build foundational customers that could stay with you for many, many, many years. When you think about Shopify, there was a rule of thumb: if anyone ever sold $20,000 worth of product, they'll never go off Shopify because the unit economics behind the cost for the subscription relative to how much you're making doesn't make any sense. So I think there's always formulas for businesses where if you create enough value, after a while, cost to ROI is so drastic that you just stay on as a customer forever because you're getting enough value to stay there. So that to me is why I believe like every initial business should be service based and it should be a tech enabled service because you want people to be able to be your use cases and you want to be able to advocate. One of my value propositions is everyone that signs up, you're going to have 5% more revenue the subsequent year. I don't like sign off on it, but I say if you're disciplined with this, there's no reason you shouldn't have 5% more than last year. And it's true.
Especially if someone is trying to replace their job income and get started on their own. I feel like a productized service is the best way because you can charge so much more and serve a variety of customers and then slowly building with the learnings from your customers.
The biggest secret I'll tell everyone, and this is something that I want everyone to think deeply about. If you automated something to make it easy for you as a operator and the end user benefits from that, never ever tell the customer how easy it is because they will value it as easy, even though technically it's hard. So initially, and this goes back 10 years ago when I was doing basically data migrations from a very complicated system in Canada. Epic is an electronic health record system. And we were trying to migrate off of it. And there's another one called Acuro. And these systems are not built to migrate off. Like they want to hook you in, they want to keep you as a customer for as long as possible, and they charge you for data extraction. So when you're transitioning to a new system, which eventually you have to do, it's very, very difficult. And we built a utility that made it so simple. And the Epic system integrators who were doing these migration outs were charging $20,000 for you to take your data. And I built a utility that essentially made it 30 minutes and nothing. And I remember the
Yeah.
mistake I made where I went into clients and started selling this $200 solution, and no one wanted to buy it because they thought this is so complicated, this is so hard. And then I was showing the simplicity of it. And then they valued it. They didn't value it for what it was doing. They valued it for how perceived its value because it was such a small and simple utility.
Yes.
Always in the background, if you're ever doing something, I always say initially when you're starting your business, try to make it tech enabled. Don't tell people how you do it. Just build the automation and then sell that value. So if for example you're doing let's say you're doing SEO and LLM lookups with websites, you can probably build this in a no code tool that works wonderfully, but you could probably charge $1,500 for that report. But if you were to sell it as a utility by itself, you're not going to sell it for more than $20 a month. So
Yes.
really what I'm trying to say is when you do the hand holding and you actually drive it and coach people through the report and do a little bit extra, you're going to be able to sell it for a lot more than just as a simple SaaS utility. So always think about how I can do a tech enabled service first, where I can drive true value to the end user before I create a utility that does it. And I think that that's a really good rule of thumb that I learned, right? I was selling a tool that I could have sold probably for $5,000 each time I did a data transfer 10 years ago for $200, and no one wanted it because their perception of it was that it was too simple and it wasn't good,
Mm, yes.
even though it's exactly what the $20,000 migration reports for using.
Yes. We did something similar. I'm a co-founder of another business, Shopify business, and we started as a productized service because it was the best way to understand customers' needs, but also it was paying a lot more money than if we just made a $50 a month SaaS, and
Yeah,
that's what allowed me to go full time eventually. And without
yeah,
that, I would probably still be consulting elsewhere because I just didn't have enough capital to do that.
that's
Yes.
exactly it. And now one of my decisions that I'm trying to figure out with Provider.app is, does this become core of who we are? Do we double down on coaching services and get people that continue the coaching? And I think the question is best answered on how can we create value for the end customer the most. And I think that it's probably going to be that way. I think there's always going to be a component where we will be doing coaching and helping clinic owners grow because it's threefold. It helps the practice management system, the people that are using their software. It helps us because they're going to stay with us, and it helps the clinic owner. So whenever you have something that you know can serve in multiple dimensions, like it's probably good to do, even if there's a little bit of cost associated to it. In the dental space, which I'm familiar with, there's this whole dental consultants. The problem with dental consultants is they're overpriced and it could create a lot of value. So there's a bad taste for what they do in the industry. So I think, it has to be a reframing around what role it is and how they can help clinics. That for sure will be part of it. And I think there's an opportunity for us to scale, help different clinic owners because there's a lot of problems. Like my clinic it's not easy. You lose a physiotherapist or you lose a occupational therapist and you lose about $30,000 a month. Just imagine tomorrow someone's like, okay, Giancarlo, you got to eat 30,000 this month until you find someone else. That's a tough pill to swallow, right?
Yeah.
With that being said, it's solvable and there's ways you can mitigate it, but it is a real risk and you need to help these clinic owners sustain.
Last question. Was there a time during your entrepreneurial business or with provider where you just said, oh no, something went horribly wrong? And how did you solve it?
I think there are problems all the time. I would say so. Initially, what we did, which was very oh no, and we realized that it was a bad call, we were going to do our data automation through a third party tool. And this third party tool was a SaaS tool that was going to build the automation, and then we would pay them tokens for each export. What happened was we're like, this is core to our business. If we can't extract data and we're dependent on a third party, and if that third party closes, our business is dead.
Or if
So
they
that's
increase
when
prices, as
increased
they
prices.
usually do.
Exactly. We were kind of getting a Trojan horse wheeled into our business before we even started. I felt gross by it because it was a faster way to get to market, but at the same time, I knew we needed to control it. So that pivot, thankfully, was the right one because there's certain things that your service has to be able to do in-house. And I think being clear about what that is so that you're not at risk was our biggest moment. That's why now I can integrate with multiple vendors and multiple systems, because we made that decision and built the tools to support it. But yeah, the business is closed, by the way, now. The one that did that initial integration, and we would have been screwed. It was just a matter of like making the judgment. During that transition phase where we're trying to figure out what do we do, I did hire someone from Upwork to start doing the research and figuring out how do we make that transition to inform me, because I didn't have the time to actually do that. So whenever you're starting off, it's okay to pay, $2,000-$3,000 for different aspects of what you need built out, or people that are going to help focus on something. Like using capital to leverage resources is a smart thing in certain capacities. Don't try to do everything yourself when possible. I know sometimes budgets are small and it's really hard to do, but there are things that you're probably not good at that you should probably pay someone else to do. And I think that's one of the things I had a very hard time accepting for a long time, even now, because, I'm the type of person like, oh, I can do it. I can do it. But then is it smart for you to do? And is it an efficient use of your time, and does it take away from your focus? If you want to be successful, you need to know what you need to focus on, and you need to make sure that you always have the energy and time available to focus on those things. In my case, it's sales, right? It's going outbound, it's talking to people, building relationships. The product is good where it's at, but at the same time, if I had to choose spending more time on building stuff versus going outbound in sales, it would be sales every time. That's part of it. Just knowing where you have breakpoints and blind spots. We all have blind spots as human beings. And I think a lot of it is we don't know until it's too late. So just make sure you talk to people who have experience so they can help identify those blind spots for you. I had something called martyrdom in the past. If you've ever heard of it, it's a cognitive bias where you try to be a hero, even when your ship is going to burn and you know it's bound for failure, where you're like, I'm going to fight with every single one of you to the end. No one wants to be with that type of leader. Everyone wants to live a
Yes.
happy life, live a normal life. They don't want to be working till 12 at night. And what I did is I created the ethos of like startup. We need to fight together. We need to do this. But it's created an unnatural and unhealthy environment. And you want to be careful about that because it's a marathon. You want people to enjoy it. You want to create a lifestyle that you want to be part of, not something that makes you miserable. And your work will reflect that. And whenever I built startups that were failing and struggling and we grinded for 4 years, no one wins. It's better to just kill it and just move on and keep on doing things that are going to add that fire and energy with you. Because once you start losing energy, you said it best, Giancarlo. You can't think deeply. You can't actually do what you need because it requires a lot of you to build good products and to manage something like Maker.
One actionable advice from this is do not choose non-open source if they're the core of your product. And what I can think of technically, it's Supabase. If Supabase went out of business tomorrow, it's open source, which means, yes, with some struggle, but you're going to survive it because you can self-host it. If you do so with different providers like Claire or others, you're not going to migrate it so easily. It recently happened with Azure DB, which was very hot technology 5 years ago, maybe. Then it recently went out of business. Customers had like very little time to migrate. And if you have a real business like yours, where you're serving hundreds and hundreds of customers, that's a real pain. If you have a side project, maybe not so much, but hopefully you're building a real business. So you have to
100%.
take that into account.
And I always say that's actually a very, very good point. Like Supabase is great. The question I want to be faced with is when I reach a certain maturity of scale, is it in-house or do I keep it with Supabase? And that's a business model designed by Supabase. If the economics behind it don't make sense, then naturally I will convert to in-house. And the same thing goes with Vercel. And I think having that flexibility and optionality is vital because if you get to a growth stage where you're mature enough and you're scale enough and economics don't make sense, you never want to be locked in. Even with CMSs, everything. The more modular you build your system, the more optionality you have, which means that the more revenue you can generate in the future. So yeah, I agree. I feel like it changed my past thinking before where I would spend so much time keeping everything in-house and then spending so much time technically. Now it's like you have to graduate to that decision. And let's use the tools that are available that are actually well supported. And once we get to that point, it's kind of like I've always had that philosophy of if I get 100 customers, okay, I'll talk to my first investor. Until I get 100 customers, I'm not going to talk to anyone. I'm just going to put my head down and try to get to 100 customers. And it served me well. And I think a lot of problems with businesses today is like they get a small signal of promise and then they spend 90% of their time pitching and in conferences and trying to grow. And that works if you're going to raise $25 million on a absurd valuation that doesn't really substantiate it. But I don't want to build that type of business. I want to build a 20-year business that is fun, it's lucrative, the people involved, we're doing it for the long term, and we're actually having fun doing it. And I think to do that, you have to also set the expectations on the people you bring on. And once you bring VCs on, you're in their timeline, not your own. And I think that's an important distinction.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Rob. It was amazing chatting with you. So much advice from your 20-year career.
Yeah, what happens when you get old?
You started early.
The good news is it's like I'm more ambitious and energetic than I was 10 years ago. And I think that's a sign of the tools and what's available. And I think one of my favorite things about my age now in early 40s is that I've matured with the technology. And I feel like now it's like, can any builder not be excited? Like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. But I guess it's like a kid in the candy store. Sometimes there's too much candy, you don't do anything, and then you regret it.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Giancarlo, and congratulations. MakerKit's wonderful, and I'll keep on updating you as we go through things and continue supporting the community.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.